Hi again. This is what my hair looks like, probably as good as it's ever looked after a nap, which I'm a big proponent of. Now, I have two places of work that I'm going to cover in one little half-hour session because they're both kind of short. Before I leave the Larson, Schroeder, and Associates discussion, I'd like to point something out. I feel good about how that all came down. I had 12 doubters for darn near a year of partners meetings, monthly partners meetings, and I resigned and basically just held them to what they had written, period. And so was I right? Let me put it this way. There were 13 partners in one firm when I was with them. Today, there are 8 different firms out of that group of 13. Unbelievable. So eventually, and it didn't take long, everybody but that first 5 people I referenced earlier agreed with me. So I take some comfort in that. All right. Let's see. IRS was 3 years. Sweet and Howland was 2. LSA, Larson, Schroeder and Associates was 2, so that's 7. Sommer, Richardson, Magnuson, Dawson is the other accounting firm I did, and it lasted 3 years. So when I get done with this CPA firm, I've got the first 10 years of my careers. Okay. I hired all my partners, but my name was last on this letterhead. We all knew I was going to leave at some time, so none of us, me included, wanted my name first on the firm's name on the letterhead, even though it should have been because of seniority, and I hired all these people. However, I could care less about stuff like that. And my partner, Leonard Sommer, totally different, totally into his image and how people looked at him and thought of him. He had to be first on that letterhead because his clients expected it, the world expected it. He had to be the most important. Have at it, I didn't care. My preferred name for that group was Sommer and Sons. Huh? Sommer, Richardson, Magnuson, Dawson. Sommer, Richard, Son, Magnuson, Dawson. Sommer and Sons. I'm telling you what, that is marketing genius. People would remember that name. And my partners, all being boring CPA types, oh no, that sounds like a used car lot or all this crap. Anyway, Sommer, Richardson, Magnuson, Dawson. The Richardson is the guy who was brought in to be the managing partner of Larson, Schroeder and Associates Omaha office. He turned out to be kind of a disaster. He sexually harassed 4 different women in our Omaha firm. I met Pat Morrow, a local attorney who represented that group of women. And I told Pat we had nothing to do with what Rob did. So obviously these ladies, who most of whom, all of whom I think we still employ, don't want to come after us. And Rob said, "Oh, Phil, you're the only ones they'd come after because you guys have all the money and you have a future. Rob probably doesn't have any money, may not have a future. That's why you're gonna settle." Okay, fine. So we settled, but it was for $10,000. Ridiculous, but okay. Pat Morrow eventually became my neighbor in Carter Lake at our beautiful condo. And when I say neighbor, we shared a small deck that we walked up. We took a left, Pat took a right, and we're in our places. And he became a very good friend. A week didn't go by that he and I and his lady, Kathy Bartling, didn't sit down for a cold one. Okay, so Rob's gone, so now it's Sommer, Magnuson, Dawson, SMD. We had a weekend partner retreat, Friday, Saturday. We, meaning myself, Leonard, Sommer, Val Magnuson. And the goal was to pick a managing partner, someone to run the firm. And that was because we had given Rob near total control. And he went off and did some harebrained stuff, not just the sexual harassment, but like coming in $75,000 over our already generous allowance when that 11711 building was developed. So there's two. So we went along for a couple of years where we all ran the firm. It was meeting upon meeting. And finally we figured out that's dumb and it's wasting everybody's time. We need to pick a leader. And Leonard, Sommer, and I were the logical candidates of the three of us. Okay, so Friday, Saturday. Friday, they beat the shit out of me because I was doing too many things in addition to having the biggest practice. I was doing real estate development. I was doing a ton of seminars that weren't CPAing. Now I was getting all my CPA work done too, but that didn't matter. I was driving them nuts. So that was Friday. I'm talking nearly the whole day. They're browbeating me. Saturday, I withdrew my name from consideration, basically giving it to Leonard. But my eldest partner, Val Magnuson, famously asked, "Phil, since when did you grow thin skin?" Phil, you're completely predictable. And what's predictable is your unpredictability. But if you lead the firm, we'll all do better than with anyone else. A really nice compliment from the partner I pissed off the most. So I was elected managing partner. Leonard, by the way, said, "Yeah, Phil, you're the obvious choice. If I became managing partner, I would set up everything to benefit me and the heck with everybody else. You, on the other hand, as you said, you need to make a lot of money. You don't need to make it all. And so you'd take care of everybody." Okay. Here's some weirdness about that. So now I'm managing partner. They insisted that I have two assistants, one of whom had to be in the room for every meeting I had. So, and for a good intention. That way we could chase down every good idea I had, which, no brag, just fact, these are other people telling me this, I had a lot of good ideas. For instance, on that Saturday, after I was elected managing partner, I went up to the chalkboard and boom, 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 wrote down the 5-year plan. And that was just an example. I had a vision of where our firm should go. Very realistic, but very well thought. Leonard, Mr. First name on letterhead. Leonard had to make the most money in the firm. Well, he didn't. Peppy, Pops Phil, did. So he and I had a little powwow, and I said, Leonard, let's do this. Let me give you enough of a bonus that you make $1 more than me. So you can say, I'm the best paid partner in that firm. And so we literally did that. Nuts to me, but okay, made him happy. Another requirement, I could only keep 25 clients. As I brought in a new one, I had to reassign an old one to a different partner. Okay, so I get elected managing partner on a Saturday. The next day, I had lunch with Mike May of May Telemarketing, who were Mike was a really big client too. He did real estate development and a telemarketing firm and blah, blah. So we're having lunch and Mike asks, Phil, in 5 years, do you know roughly where your company's going to be in terms of revenues and in terms of profits? And I said, oh yeah. And he said, how sure of that are you? And I said, about as close to 100% as you can be. Then he asked me, Phil, in 5 years, do you want to be the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, of a $5 million company, or the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, of a $50 million company? And I went, huh. So he offered me, and I accepted the role of CFO in May Telemarketing. And I also own 10% of the company. Thus, I resigned from Sommer, Magnuson, Dawson 3 days after they elected me managing partner. Another group of CPAs pissed, and very fairly, they should have been. No ill intent on my part. Circumstances dictated it. I wish the timing had been flipped and we'd never had a discussion about who was going to be managing partner. To a guy I had hired way back when it was just 3 of us, starting Larson Schroeder Omaha, Daryl Gransky. In fact, he was hired while I was at Sweet. We needed more tax expertise. Daryl was a genius. So he had just been made a partner and had very little business, and quite honestly, very little way to generate a lot of new business. That just wasn't Daryl. He was the guy that you handed off clients to because you couldn't take care of all of them, me, and he would take fabulous care of. Well, now I'm gone, and Daryl's going, what do I have here? So I gave him my $500,000 fee practice. You're welcome, Daryl. Sometimes I'm too generous. Back in that section of CPA life, my second best friend, Norm Lund, and Mike May sailed from Fort Lauderdale into Key West over the course of a few days, taking their time. After the first tax season, like signing day, April 15th, Mike May asked, or he said, it's one way to thank your professionals, attorney, CPA, etc., is to pay their bill on time. Another way is to invite them along, as I am doing to you, to a trip to Key West for about a week. Are you in? Daryl says, oh, Mike, I want you to pay the bills. I don't expect you to take me to Key West. So thank you very much for the offer, but no. And I asked, when do we leave? While we were there, Mike and Norm got into a tussle about how you pronounce a word spelled Q-U-A-Y. Norm said, it's quay. Look at how it's spelled. Mike said, oh no, it's key. So they didn't know it, but I looked like I was going to the bathroom, and instead I got the restaurant's phone and I called the San Francisco Public Library's reference desk. And I asked them to open their dictionary and tell me how you pronounce Q-U-A-Y. Well, it came back, preferred is key, also accepted, quay. So that was a complete hoot. When we got done with the trip, got home, I figured I owe him a thank you. So I bought him a present. And it was one of those massive Merriam-Webster dictionaries with a card in the sheet that had the word quay in it. And it was wrapped in Budweiser wrapping paper because we drank a little bit of that on the trip. Another story about those days. I had a client, Bill Cotter, did various stuff with Bill. He invited me to St. John in the Virgin Islands with some clients of his that were interested in possibly investing in a beautiful resort down there. So we're on a private jet that has to stop to refuel in Boca Raton, a very ritzy part of the world. Two cool things happen. The most memorable thing I have ever done scuba diving was down there on St. John in the Virgin Islands, a huge swarm of fish, red fish, about a little bigger than the size of your hand, came swimming toward me. They didn't recognize me as a threat, and so as I swam toward them, they just parted. And I swam right down the middle of this school of fish. totally cool. And secondly, Norm Lund, if you recall from the Key West story, we had no idea that Norm was going to be in the same place at the same time. And we only knew that because I'm looking outside the restaurant, which had no windows because the temperature varies 2 degrees all year, 78 to 80. No need for windows. I see Norm and his lady friend Nancy walking up a path that would pass right by our restaurant's window, like 10 feet away. So I say to Mike, hey, you're not going to believe this, but Norm Lund is walking toward us. You just keep eating. I'll handle it. So Norm goes walking by. When he gets about 10 feet short of us, I look up and I go, hey, Norm, and go right back to eating. That's about it for Sommer, Magnuson, Dawson. 3 years there. So now I'm up to 10. So I'm done with that. I'm on to May telemarketing for a couple of years. In order to receive that 10% ownership and, help the company survive, et cetera, I took a $100,000 pay cut. My last year in the CPA life, I made $165,000. I took a pay cut to $60,000. As a result, we had to move out of our Pepperwood house at 150th Dodge and move into the crappiest house we lived in, maybe with the exception of the first one, on Elm Street over in Rockbrook Village area. Once again, I wonder why Sherry divorced me. But it was a chance to be worth $5 million if we get 5 years down the road and sell the telemarketing company for $50 million, which was a fair bet. When I started with Mike at May Telemarketing, the chief operating officer was a guy named Rick Smith. A slime, as I learned over time. May Telemarketing had the usual 10 days of paid vacation a year. So less than one a month. And that was pretty typical. I said I had to have 2 or 3 days a month, meaning not 10 days a year, but 24, 2 dozen to 36, 3 dozen paid vacation days per year. And Rick exploded. You are out of your goddamn mind. And Mike said, hold it, Rick, I've known this guy for a couple of years. I'll tell you what happens. He comes in, and for weeks, he works his tail off and is wildly productive and completely burns himself out. And what he's famous for is the 2, 3, 4, 5 day weekend about once a month. And so, yeah, he does need those days, And he gets those days. Probably the start of Rick hating me. Do you see a pattern here? I was obsessed with making my $2.5 to $5 million out of selling Maytel marketing. If I could have those years back, I would. And I wouldn't have been so focused on business. I mean, you guys got cheated out of a dad in major respects. Now, just like Sherry, you were treated phenomenally from an income point of view, and what we did with that, what I did with that. I think you've both been in 49 out of 50 states. COVID killed Hawaii, or it'd be all of them. So I was a tremendous provider, but I recognize now I was lacking in other ways. Good old Rick Smith, the chief operating officer, was famous for his temper. I'd been there like 2 weeks. He and I are in the conference room. He isn't bitching at me, but he is freaking screaming about something going on in the firm. And I sat there like this. And he went on for like 30 seconds before he even took a breath. And I look at him and go, when you're done. Oh my God. So he never raised his voice around me again. I'd kind of called his bluff, kind of embarrassed him as to the way he was handling things. May, primarily Rick, cheated and lied to Time Warner. Time incorporated the magazine company, and Warner Brothers Studios. They had this huge company, and May Telemarketing had cheated them. And I won't get into details because it would take too long. Anyway, I am dispatched to go to New York City and meet with Time Warner and, as they say, fall on my sword. Admit, yes, we've been screwing you. You know, we'd love to keep you. We'd understand if you fired us, etc. So, I had the privilege of going because I didn't have any poop on me like the other guys did. Walk in the room, and there are 6 Ivy League Time Warner employees, and they ripped me a new one, but mission accomplished. We kept them, etc. Similar to Mike taking me to Key West, he took Sherry and I to a Mexican resort. It was a Club Med resort, which I think still goes, at Sonora Bay, Mexico. Was the first and only time that I paddleboarded, where you're standing basically on a surfboard and you crawl up on it and you raise the sail, which is laying down, and the wind pushes you around. And, you know, it takes, I don't know, 50, 100 times to figure out how to get on the darn thing. Then it becomes fairly straightforward. And pretty quickly, once I'm standing on it, I get the feel for using the sail. And that was fun. Also, there was an island a mile away from this Club Med that was called Seal Island, for obvious reasons, like hundreds of seals living on and around this island. And I was scuba diving, and they would come barreling right at you underwater, and then right as they're about going to hit you, boop, veer off one side or another. Cool. Also at May, the company needed a $250,000 payroll covered. Meredith Corporation, Better Homes and Gardens, and related publications owed us like $275,000, and it was supposed to arrive a couple days prior to payroll. Then it was supposed to arrive the day before, and it didn't. And it was supposed to arrive the day of payroll, and it didn't. And the three of us at the top decided we have to make payroll, and we have to figure out a way to cover it, but we're gonna let the payroll fly. So Meredith Corporation's check didn't come on the day of payroll, didn't come the day after. And the three of us are off to see Jim Fiddle at Mid-City Bank to see if he would cover that check. And he did. As we're walking out of Jim's office, he goes, "Phil, get in here." And he says, "Obviously, you didn't think of this. That is a massive felony to basically bounce $250,000 of paychecks. Don't be so stupid in the future." May telemarketing. The World Herald made a $2 million investment in May telemarketing. World Herald is employee owned, so they had hundreds of shareholders, just basic Joes off the street. Two things about that. John Gottschalk used to be a huge figure in Omaha philanthropy because he was the CEO and the biggest shareholder in the Omaha World Herald. We got to go to, I use the word God, monthly meetings with John and his CFO, Bill Kernan. And after 3 or 4 of those, we're explaining why we had missed our numbers again every month. John turned to me and he said, "Phil, we're pretty happy with the job you're doing. Your areas seem to be running well. Rick and Mike, when in the F do you think you'll ever understand what's going on in your business?" Oh, well. So they had, the Omaha World Herald, an annual shareholders meeting. And we had to say whether we had had a successful year or not, which was a big deal because that would affect the valuation of our company, which affected what it's worth to Joe off the street. The day before that meeting, the guy the World Herald had put in May telemarketing to kind of watch the store after that $2 million investment, his name was Tim Kaiser. And I'm in a meeting with Tim, Mike, and Rick. And Tim says, "Well, we have to tell them we about broke even. They'll be okay with break even." And I went, Tim, I know you're aware, we lost $1 million. That's not exactly break even. And he says, that's what you're going to tell them tomorrow, and it's not up for discussion. So I quit and went home and told Sherry I quit. And she was totally nonplussed, and she said, oh, where's your next job? Where are you going? And I said, well, I don't have any idea. This just came up within the hour. And I explained, but the bottom line was, not only had I taken $100,000 pay cut, I was now earning nothing. So my 2.5 to 5 million hoped for bucks were gone. And one more story in which I asked, why did Sherry divorce me?